numbers too big to ignore, and I know too much to go back and pretend. 'Cause I've heard it all before, and I've been down there on the floor.
Title IX was passed by Congress on June 23, 1972, making gender discrimination illegal in federally funded education programs. The women's civil rights movement was a revolution which paved the way for Title IX's passage. Although Title IX has created equality in all educational programs and activities, it has revolutionized athletics for women. It reformed high schools and colleges across America by providing scholarships and funding for female athletes. Despite varied reactions to Title IX, there is no denying that it has increased athletic opportunities for women. Although the playing fields for men and women are still not equal, great strides have been made towards gender equality in athletics.
Say you want a revolution.
Women have struggled for reforms in America for over 200 years. The fight for women's equality started at the height of the women's liberation movement. The revolution started in the 1960s, but it was often overshadowed by the civil rights movement. Women's activists and women's rights programs separated themselves at the end of the 1960s. This is because they were overlooked by the civil rights groups, who belittled their cause. Shulamith Firestone, a feminist, tried to speak at the Democratic National Convention in Chicago in 1968, only to be patted on the head by the chairperson, William Pepper. He said, "Move on, little girl. We have more important issues to talk about here than women's liberation." Before Title IX, it was socially acceptable for women and girls to be treated differently. Girls were accustomed to the way athletics were mishandled in schools.
I guess growing up, you just did it, and you didn't really have, it's just the way it was.
Before Title IX, women's athletics received only 2% of athletic budgets in colleges and schools, and sometimes no share whatsoever. No colleges or universities offered scholarships for female athletes. Donna DeVerona, a swimmer, was the youngest participant at the 1960 Summer Olympics. Despite this, she could not swim in college because women could not get athletic scholarships. Women's civil rights activists pushed for reforms and equality in all aspects of education. Feminists began to take legal action against the unjust treatments from lawmakers and congressmen. Bernice Sandler, a women's rights activist, worked with NOW, an organization which works to enforce women's rights, to file over 200 complaints against universities and colleges who did not provide women with equal opportunities. Along with Congresswoman Edith Green, Bernice Sandler introduced Title IX to Congress.
As a result of the feminist efforts, Title IX was signed into law on June 23, 1972 by President Richard Nixon as a promise to reform the way women were treated in educational programs. Title IX states that no person in the United States shall, on the basis of sex, be excluded from participation in, be denied the benefits of, or be subjected to discrimination under any educational program or activity receiving federal financial assistance. When the law was passed, people were not sure how to react because of its vague explanation. How were schools supposed to comply? Did the law even apply to sports in schools? After all, the reform of Title IX was created for equality in education. A common misconception of Title IX is that the law only applies to athletics, but it also pertains to other educational programs like career education and standardized testing. In other words, Title IX applies to any educational program that indirectly or directly receives federal aid. There were many varied reactions to Title IX. Many men's athletic associations, such as the NCAA, criticized Title IX's regulations. They believed that rules had gone too far and were worried that Title IX would negatively affect men's sports. Would schools have to create women's athletics out of the already existing men's athletic budget? Some people, such as Jackie Lapin, a writer and speaker, believe that men's sports programs have been living high on the hog for many years in many ways. They're knocking Title IX down because it won't allow them to keep on doing what they are doing wrong. After the legislation was passed, girls and women took advantage of their newly earned opportunities. The number of female athletes in high school sports tripled from 1973 to 1974, a year after the legislation was passed. The women's rowing team at Yale still suffered from inequality after the law was passed. Around 1976, the team repeatedly had to wait outside on their buses in the cold while the men's team took their showers first. On March 3, 1976, the women's team decided that enough was enough.
We were not warm and happy and pink on the bus. We had plenty of time to talk about what we needed to do.
We gathered in the locker room that day.
We wrote Title IX on our chests and our backs.
She took one look at our faces. She was sitting at her desk, and she stood up. That's all she did. She just stood up.
then we took off our sweats.
And Chris read the statement about these are the bodies.
These are the bodies Yale is exploiting. On a day like today, the ice freezes on this skin. Then we sit for a half hour as the ice melts and soaks through to meet the sweat that is soaking us from the inside.
Who knew 37 words could cause so many conflicting reactions? 7 years after the enactment of Title IX, schools were finally given guidelines to reform schools in order to comply. In reaction to America's uncertainty in athletic compliance with Title IX, on December 11, 1979, the U.S. Department of Health, Education, and Welfare created the three-prong test, which lists 3 ways of complying to Title IX. The first prong is to have substantial proportionality. The second prong is to show a continuing increase of sports-related opportunities for women. The third prong is to meet the interest of the underrepresented sex by supplying athletic opportunities that fit their interests and abilities.
Reforms created by Title IX have been successful in giving women opportunities in athletics. Prior to Title IX, 1 in every 27 girls played high school sports. Now that number is every 2 in 5.
Without Title IX, I can say that I would not have gotten a college scholarship and that I would not have been swimming in the 1984 Olympics, which was 4 years later. That it just didn't matter how hard I worked or how talented I was. We needed to have that law in order for me to get a full college scholarship and be able to participate in college.
Despite this, many low-profile men's sports teams like gymnastics, wrestling, and track have been cut. According to these teams, the blame is Title IX. Unfortunately, the quickest and easiest way for schools to comply is to cut these low-profile teams. The reason males' teams are cut is because schools would rather pay for big money-making teams like football. This is a bad decision because 67% of schools lose money annually to football. Of course, this is not the only way to comply with Title IX. Schools showing an effort to increase female athletic opportunities are complying. A common reaction from athletic programs is that Title IX is a quota law, meaning that Title IX requires a certain number of male to female students. The law does not allow reverse discrimination because it is not a quota law. In addition, the General Accounting Office report has found that 72% of schools have added women's teams without discontinuing any male sports team. Women have come a long way since 1972. Over the past 40 years, the participation of female athletes in college sports has increased 500%. Participation of female athletes in high school sports has increased 1,000%. Title IX has not only impacted athletics, but revolutionized the image of women. Women are no longer viewed as the weaker sex.
Sport turned out to really be a catalyst for it was a very powerful, wonderful, healing, affirming part of my life.
Research shows that being a female athlete has its benefits, like less female pregnancies, higher self-esteem, and higher grades. Christine Grant, former president of the AIAW, says, "If we can have equality in athletics, we can have equality in all aspects of society." Even though the reforms made in schools have had a definite impact, greater changes are still to be made. As Amy Cohen, a supporter of the law who fought through a lawsuit in 1997 for women's equality, has stated, "I think girls growing up today can't imagine that anyone ever thought girls shouldn't play sports. But I don't think that women have completely reached equality in high school and college sports. Not enough young people today, including athletes and students across America, are taught of Title IX and all that it has done for women in society." Another problem with Title IX is its enforcement. Agencies in charge of enforcing Title IX do not have adequate resources or tools to enforce the law, partly because loss of federal aid is too big of a penalty. Heidi Grappendorf, former basketball player, says, "Not one school in 40 years has ever lost federal funding, yet we still have schools not in compliance with Title IX.
Title IX is a law that has revolutionized the image of women in sports. It has reformed schools across America, protecting the rights female students deserve. In spite of the wide-ranging reactions in the law, Title IX had certainly opened new doors to women. Even though the gap between male and female athletes is still not equal, Title IX has undoubtedly given women the chance to reach new heights never even thought possible prior to the law.